The Great Hall of Nexus Prime Station was built to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. The walls were made of black stone brought from a dead world, polished until they reflected light like dark mirrors. 12 massive thrones sat in a half circle at the center, each one designed for a different species, each one meant to show power and age and importance. Today, all 12 thrones were filled. The rulers and representatives of the galaxy's oldest civilizations had gathered for what they called an emergency session, but everyone knew what this really was. This was a trial, and humanity was the one being judged. Director Elena Vasquez stood alone at the center of the floor. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm brown eyes. She wore a simple black suit with no medals or decorations. Compared to the massive aliens surrounding her, she looked like a child standing before giants. High Arbiter Vorthax of the Kethvari leaned forward on his throne. His species looked something like tall insects, with 4 arms and eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. His voice boomed through the hall, translated instantly into human language by the small device in Elena's ear. Director Vasquez, he said, you stand before the Dominion of United Species to answer for humanity's crimes against galactic order. Elena did not flinch. She had expected this day for years. Everyone in Earth government had expected it. They had prepared for it. Some of them had even prayed for it. I am ready to hear the charges, she said simply. Vorthax gestured with one of his 4 arms. A holographic display appeared in the air, showing maps and charts and lists of numbers. In the past 50 years, Vorthax announced, humanity has expanded beyond its assigned boundaries 47 times. You have colonized worlds that were reserved for elder species. You have developed weapons that you refuse to share or explain. You have ignored diplomatic requests to limit your growth. And worst of all, you have refused to accept your proper place in the galactic hierarchy. Murmurs of agreement came from several thrones. The Ven, a species of massive 6-legged creatures covered in thick armor, stomped their approval. The Silith, beings made of living crystal, chimed in harmonics that expressed their displeasure. Elena waited for the noise to die down. Then she spoke in the same calm voice. The worlds we colonized were empty. No one was using them. The weapons we developed are for our own defense. And as for our proper place in the hierarchy, she paused and looked around the great hall. Perhaps you could explain to me what that place is supposed to be. Vorthax's eyes narrowed. He had ruled the Kethvari for 300 years. No one spoke to him this way. Certainly not a representative of a species that had only been in space for 2 centuries. Your place, he said coldly, is at the bottom. You are the youngest species in the Dominion. You have no ancient history. You have no great achievements. You are children playing at civilization, and you have been tolerated long enough. The other representatives made sounds of approval. This was what they had come for. This was what they wanted to hear. Elena nodded slowly, as if considering his words. And what do you propose to do about it? Vorthax stood from his throne. He was nearly 3 meters tall, and his shadow fell over the human woman like a dark wave. The Dominion of United Species hereby declares sanctioned warfare against Earth and all human colonies, he announced. His voice echoed through the hall. The Kethvari, the Ven, and the Silith have formed a coalition to bring humanity under proper control. You will surrender your unauthorized colonies. You will limit your population growth. You will share all weapons technology, and you will accept permanent oversight from the elder species. He paused, letting his words sink in. If you refuse, we will take these things by force. Your species will learn its place, Director Vasquez. One way or another, the hall fell silent. Every eye and sensor and receptor turned toward the human woman. They expected fear. They expected panic. They expected her to beg for mercy or time to consult with her government. Instead, Elena Vasquez smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but there was something in it that made several of the watching representatives uncomfortable. It was not the smile of someone who had just received terrible news. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. I understand, Elena said. I will convey your declaration to my government. You will have our official response within 1 standard day. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the silent hall. No one tried to stop her. No one spoke until she was gone. Only then did Ambassador Crix of the Ven lean toward Vorthax and speak in a low voice. "Did you see her face?" he asked. She did not seem afraid. Vorthax settled back onto his throne. "She is putting on a brave show for her people. Humans are emotional creatures. They value pride over wisdom. But when our fleets arrive at their borders, their pride will turn to dust." "I hope you are right," Crix said, but his voice held a note of doubt that had not been there before. Elena Vasquez walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime Station without hurrying. She nodded politely to the aliens she passed. She stopped to admire a piece of art in one of the galleries. She even bought a small snack from a vendor near the docking bay. Only when she was safely aboard her personal shuttle, with the doors sealed and the engines warming up, did she allow her smile to grow wider. She pulled out a communication device and typed a single encrypted message to Earth. "They finally did it." The response came back in seconds. "Understood. Protocols activated. Welcome home, Director." Elena leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. She had spent 20 years in the diplomatic corps, pretending to be weak, pretending to be afraid, pretending that humanity was just another young species struggling to find its place in a hostile galaxy. It had been exhausting work, and now it was over. On Earth, the message arrived at exactly 1447 Universal Time. Within minutes, it had been verified, decoded, and sent to every major government on the planet. President Maria Santos read it in her office in Geneva. She had been expecting it. Her predecessor had expected it. And his predecessor before him. For 3 generations, Earth's leaders had known that this day would come. She pressed a button on her desk. "Get me General Armstrong," she said, "and activate Protocol Sunrise." Across the planet, secure facilities that had been dormant for decades suddenly came to life. Hidden beneath mountains and oceans and ordinary-looking buildings, machines began to wake up. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for a war they hoped would never come receive their orders and move to their positions. But there was no panic, no chaos, no fear. Earth had been preparing for this war since the day they first made contact with alien life. They had seen how the elder species treated younger civilizations. They had watched other young species get absorbed or destroyed or reduced to servants. And they had decided, quietly and secretly, that this would never happen to them. General James Armstrong arrived at the presidential palace within the hour. He was a tall man with white hair and steady hands, a soldier who had spent 40 years getting ready for a battle that everyone hoped would never happen. "The coalition has declared sanctioned warfare," President Santos told him. "Kethvari, Ven, and Seleth. Probably 6,000 ships total." Armstrong nodded. He had studied every possible combination of enemies. He knew their ships, their tactics, their weaknesses. He knew things about them that they did not know about themselves. "How long until they reach our borders?" he asked. "Intelligence estimates 3 weeks. They will want to gather their forces and make a show of strength." 3 weeks. Armstrong allowed himself a small smile. "That is more than enough time." President Santos stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city of Geneva looked peaceful. People walked through the streets, living their ordinary lives. They did not know yet that war had been declared. They did not know that everything was about to change. "I want you to understand something, General," she said without turning around. "Our goal is not conquest. Our goal is not revenge. Our goal is to show them what humanity truly is, and then to offer them something better than what they tried to take from us." "I understand, Madam President." "Good." She turned to face him. "Then wake them up. Wake all of them up. And show the galaxy what happens when Earth finally stops pretending." Armstrong saluted and left. As he walked through the corridors, he passed dozens of staff members going about their business. Some of them knew what was happening, most did not, but they would find out soon enough. The galaxy had declared war on humanity, and for the first time in 200 years, Earth could finally stop hiding. In hidden bases across the solar system, lights flickered on. Engines that had been silent for decades began to hum. Soldiers looked at each other and shared quiet smiles. They had waited so long for this moment. They had trained and prepared and kept their secrets, all for a day they hoped would never come, but always knew it would. And now it was here. Earth's official response to the declaration of war was transmitted to Nexus Prime exactly 23 hours and 47 minutes after Elena Vasquez left the Great Hall. It was short and polite, and somehow more terrifying than any threat could have been. The people of Earth accept the Dominion's declaration of sanctioned warfare. We look forward to showing you what that means. May your gods have mercy on you, for we have learned how to live without such things. The galaxy had started a war, and Earth was smiling. Admiral Chen Weilin stood on the observation deck of Station Omega-7 and watched the stars. The station was hidden inside an asteroid in the outer reaches of the solar system, far from any trade routes or patrol paths. From the outside, it looked like nothing but dead rock floating through the space. From the inside, it was a city. 50,000 people lived and worked here, building ships and weapons and systems that the galaxy did not know existed. They had lived their entire lives in secret, knowing that one day their work would matter, and now that day had come. "Admiral," said a young officer behind her, "the president is ready for you." Chen nodded and turned away from the window. She was 62 years old with short gray hair and the kind of calm face that never showed surprise or fear. She had commanded human warships for 30 years, but she had never fired a shot in anger. None of them had. There had never been a need. Until now. She walked through the corridors of the station, past workers and soldiers who stopped to salute as she passed. Everyone knew what was happening. Everyone had received the message from Earth. The war they had trained for their entire lives was finally beginning. The communications center was deep in the heart of the station, protected by layers of armor and shields that could survive almost anything. President Santos appeared on the main screen, her image transmitted through channels so secure that not even the elder species knew they existed. "Admiral Chen," the president said, "I assume you have heard the news?" "Yes, Madam President. The coalition has declared war. The Kethvari, Ven, and Silith are gathering their forces. Intelligence puts their combined fleet at approximately 6,000 ships. They believe this is more than enough to overwhelm our border defenses." Chen allowed herself a small smile. They would be correct if our border defenses were all we had. President Santos nodded. "It is time to wake up the rest. All of them. I am authorizing full activation of Protocol Sunrise." "Understood. How do you want this to end, Madam President?" The question was important. Chen could crush the coalition fleet entirely. She could destroy their homeworlds, wipe out their civilizations, and end the elder species forever. She had the power to do all of this, but power without purpose was just destruction. "I want them to understand," Santos said carefully. "I want them to see what we are and what we could have done to them. And then I want them to see what we choose to do instead. This is not about revenge, Admiral. This is about teaching them a lesson they will never forget." "Mercy as a weapon," Chen said. "Mercy as a message. Show them our strength, Admiral, and then show them our restraint. That is how we will change everything." The screen went dark. Chen stood for a moment, thinking about what was to come. Then she turned to her staff. "Begin full activation," she ordered. "Every station, every shipyard, every hidden fleet, wake them all up. The galaxy is about to learn who we really are." For 200 years, humanity had pretended to be weak. They had built a few dozen colonies on worlds the elder species did not want. They had created a modest defense fleet of perhaps 300 ships. They had acted like grateful newcomers to the galactic stage, eager to please and easy to ignore. It was all a lie. The truth was hidden in places no one thought to look. Inside asteroids and moons and artificial structures disguised as debris. In dimensions that the galaxy believed were impossible to access. In systems so far from the traveled routes that no one bothered to explore them. As Admiral Chen gave her orders, that truth began to wake up. In the asteroid belt beyond Mars, a mountain of rock split open to reveal a shipyard the size of a small moon. Inside it, 500 warships waited in neat rows, their hulls gleaming with technology that the elder species had not yet invented. Engineers who had spent their whole lives building these ships now ran final checks on systems that had never been tested in real combat. Further out, past the orbit of Jupiter, a hidden station called Tartarus Deep came online for the first time in decades. This was where humanity's most dangerous weapons were built. things that could crack planets and tear holes in the fabric of space itself. The scientists here had hoped their work would never be needed. Now they prepared to deliver it to the fleet. And beyond the solar system, in hidden colonies scattered across hundreds of light years, billions of humans received the same message. The time has come. These were not the colonists that the galaxy knew about. The public colonies held perhaps 2 billion people total, a number that the elder species considered manageable. But the hidden colonies held trillions. Humanity had been spreading quietly for generations, building civilizations in places no one else wanted, growing in silence until they outnumbered the entire galactic population. Admiral Chen toured the awakening war machine over the next several days. She visited shipyards where new vessels were being completed at impossible speed. She inspected weapons that could disable enemy ships without killing their crews. She met with commanders who had trained their whole careers for a war that might never come. Everywhere she went, she saw the same thing. Calm, professional determination. No anger, no hatred, no desire for revenge. Just soldiers doing the job they had prepared for. "How many ships do we have ready for deployment?" she asked her chief of staff during one inspection. Commander Yuki Tanaka checked her tablet. "Currently, we have 15,000 capital ships fully operational. Another 8,000 will be ready within the week. Support vessels and fighters bring the total to approximately 50,000 combat-ready craft." Chen nodded. The coalition was bringing 6,000 ships. They thought this made them unstoppable. "And the dimensional drives?" she asked. "All units report green. We can appear anywhere in the galaxy within hours, and they will never see us coming." This was humanity's greatest secret. The elder species used hyperspace to travel between stars, a technology they had developed millions of years ago and considered the ultimate achievement. But humanity had found something better. They had learned to fold space itself, to step from one point in the universe to another without passing through the distance between. The coalition fleet would gather at humanity's border, expecting to face 300 outdated warships. Instead, they would find themselves surrounded by a force that outnumbered them 10 to 1, appearing from nowhere, armed with weapons they could not understand. "There is one more thing," Tanaka said carefully. "Our observers report that a young Kethavari officer has noticed anomalies in their sensor data. He believes something is wrong with the intelligence about human forces." And what happened when he reported this? His superiors dismissed him. They said he was imagining things. Chen closed her eyes for a moment. She had hoped the coalition would see reason. She had hoped someone on their side would ask the right questions and realize that this war was a terrible mistake. But pride and arrogance were powerful things. "What is this officer's name?" she asked. "Lieutenant Vorketh. He is assigned to a patrol vessel in the forward fleet. Make a note of him. If he survives what is coming, I want to meet him. The galaxy will need people who can see the truth, even when their leaders cannot." While humanity prepared for war, the coalition gathered its forces with great ceremony. High Arbiter Vorthax himself traveled to the staging area near human space, accompanied by a fleet of 4,000 Kethvari warships. The Ven contributed another 1,000 vessels, each one as big as a small city. The Seleth added their own forces, crystalline ships that sang as they moved through space. They made no attempt to hide their preparations. They wanted humanity to see what was coming. They wanted the young species to understand the hopelessness of their situation and surrender before any blood was spilled. Vorthax stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the fleet assemble. It was a magnificent sight. 6,000 warships, crewed by species that had ruled the stars for millions of years. Against this force, humanity's 300 border ships would be dust in the solar wind. "High Arbiter," one of his officers reported, "our scouts have completed their survey of human defenses. They have approximately 300 vessels of various sizes, concentrated around their core worlds. No sign of additional forces or hidden reserves." "As expected," Vorthax said. "They put all their resources into their colonies instead of their military. A foolish choice. There is one concern, High Arbiter. Some of our sensor readings have been inconsistent. Lieutenant Vorketh believes there may be more to human capabilities than our intelligence suggests." Vorthax turned to look at the officer. "Vorketh? The nervous young fool who sees shadows everywhere? Ignore him. Humanity has been in space for 2 centuries. We have been here for 2 million years. There is nothing they could possibly have that would threaten us. Yes, High Arbiter. The officer returned to his station, but doubt lingered in his mind. The sensor readings had been strange. Flickers of energy in places where nothing should exist. Gravity distortions that made no sense. Small things easily explained away. But they added up to a picture that made him uncomfortable. Still, he was just an officer. The High Arbiter had spoken, and the fleet was ready to move. In 3 days, they would cross into human space. In a week, they would reach Earth itself. And then the young species would finally learn its place in the galaxy. Or so they believed. Far away in the darkness between stars, humanity's hidden fleets began to move. 50,000 ships, invisible and silent, slipping through folds in space that the elder species did not know existed. They would arrive at the border before the coalition even knew they were coming, and when they revealed themselves, everything would change. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Dawn, and watched the final preparations. Her crew moved with quiet efficiency, checking systems and running simulations, and making ready for the battle to come. "All units report ready, Admiral," Commander Tanaka announced. "The fleet is in position. We are awaiting your order to engage dimensional drives." Chen looked out at the stars one last time. Somewhere out there, the coalition was marching toward what they thought would be an easy victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. "Signal all ships," she said. "Tell them, it is time to stop hiding. Show them who we are." The order went out across the fleet, and in the silence of space, 50,000 engines began to hum. The galaxy was about to meet the real humanity. The coalition fleet jumped into human space on the morning of what the HFY called the Day of Justice. 6,000 warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons armed and their crews ready for battle. High Arbiter Vorthax stood on the bridge of his flagship and smiled at the sight of such overwhelming power. The system they had entered was called Kepler's Reach by the humans. It was the first major colony world on the path to Earth, home to perhaps 50 million people. According to intelligence reports, it was defended by a handful of outdated patrol ships and some orbital platforms. But when the coalition fleet completed their arrival scans, they found nothing. "Report," Vorthax commanded. "The system is empty, High Arbiter," his tactical officer said, confusion clear in his voice. "No human vessels detected. The orbital platforms around the colony world are powered down. There is no sign of any defense force." Vorthax's 4 eyes narrowed. Now this was unexpected. He had anticipated some resistance, however futile. Instead, the humans had apparently fled before his fleet even arrived. "They knew they could not stand against us," he said after a moment. "They have abandoned this world to save their ships for the defense of Earth. A wise decision, if a cowardly one." He gestured toward the main display. "Signal the fleet. We will proceed to the colony and accept their surrender. Let this be a lesson to all young species who forget their place." The coalition fleet moved forward in a proud formation. 3,000 vessels forming the main body, while the rest spread out to secure the system. They traveled slowly, wanting the colonists below to see the full might of the elder species bearing down upon them. They were so focused on the planet ahead that they did not notice the space behind them beginning to tear. Lieutenant Vorkith was assigned to a patrol vessel at the rear of the formation. His job was to watch for any human ships that might try to flank the fleet, a duty his superiors considered a waste of time. What could a few human vessels do against 6,000 warships? But Vorkith took his duty seriously, and when his sensors began showing impossible readings, he did not ignore them. "Commander," he said carefully, "I am detecting gravitational distortions astern. Multiple points. The readings do not match any known phenomenon." His commander, an older Kethvari named Thexval, glanced at the display with clear irritation. "Sensor glitches. We have been over this, Lieutenant. Human technology cannot—" He stopped. His eyes went wide. Behind the coalition fleet, space itself was ripping open. The tiers started small, like cracks in a frozen lake. Then they widened, and from each one emerged a human warship. Not the small, outdated vessels the coalition expected. These were massive things, bristling with weapons the elder species had never seen, running so dark that they had been invisible until this moment. And they kept coming. 100 ships, then 500, then 1,000. The tiers multiplied across the void, each one delivering more vessels. Within minutes, the coalition fleet was surrounded by a force that outnumbered them more than 2 to 1. Vorketh stared at his display in shock. The readings were impossible. Human ships did not use hyperspace drives. They could not appear from nowhere like this. And the energy signatures he was detecting suggested weapon systems that should not exist. "Commander," he whispered, "what is happening?" Thexval did not answer. He was too busy watching the tactical display as it updated with the new threat assessment. The numbers were devastating. Over 15,000 human vessels now surrounded the coalition fleet, with more still arriving. On the flagship, High Arbiter Vortex received the reports with growing horror. This was not possible. Humanity was a young species with limited resources. They could not have built this fleet. They could not have hidden it from the Dominion's intelligence services. They could not possess technology that allowed them to travel without using hyperspace. And yet here they were. A communication signal cut through the chaos. It was broadcast on all frequencies, translated into every language used by the coalition. "This is Admiral Chen Wei-Lin of the Earth Defense Force," a calm human voice announced. "Your fleet is surrounded. Your weapons are outmatched. Your retreat is blocked. But we do not wish to destroy you. We are offering you one chance to withdraw. Power down your weapons, reverse course, and return to Dominion space. Do this now, and no one needs to die today." Vorthak's hands trembled with rage and fear. This was impossible. This was a trick. It had to be. "They are bluffing," he declared. "Those ships cannot be real. This is some kind of holographic deception designed to frighten us." He turned to his communications officer. "Respond to the human admiral. Tell her that the Dominion does not negotiate with liars. Tell her to surrender her fake fleet before we destroy it." The officer hesitated. "High Arbiter, our sensors confirm that the human ships are real. Their weapons are charging. If we engage, do as I command." The message was sent. For a long moment, nothing happened. The human fleet held position, silent and still. Then Admiral Chen's voice came again, and this time it carried a note of something that might have been sadness. "I gave you a chance," she said. "I hoped you would take it. Remember that what happens next was your choice, not ours." The battle began, or rather the demonstration began. Because what followed was not really a battle at all. It was a lesson. The human ships fired first. Beams of energy that the coalition had never seen before lanced across the void, striking vessels throughout the fleet. But instead of explosions and death, the targeted ships simply went dark. Their engines died. Their weapon systems failed. Their shields collapsed. In seconds, they were drifting hulks, powerless but intact. The coalition tried to fight back. Thousands of weapons fired at the human fleet, missiles and energy beams and kinetic projectiles of every kind. But the human ships moved with impossible speed, dodging attacks that should have hit them. Their shields absorbed what could not be avoided, and their return fire continued to disable coalition vessels with surgical precision. Vorketh watched from his patrol vessel as the flagship was hit. The massive Kethavari warship shuddered as human weapons struck it, and then all the lights went out. Emergency power flickered on a moment later, but the engines were dead. The weapons were silent. The great ship of the High Arbiter drifted helplessly in the void. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, the coalition fleet was a field of drifting hulks. 6,000 warships, crewed by millions of beings from 3 of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, had been defeated without a single fatality on either side. Human ships moved through the wreckage, not to loot or destroy, but to help. They attached emergency power units to vessels whose life support had failed. They broadcast medical assistance offers to any ship that needed it. They behaved not like conquerors, but like rescuers. Admiral Chen's voice came one final time over the fleet-wide channel. "Your ships are disabled, but your crews are alive. We are not your enemies. We never wanted to be your enemies. But you gave us no choice except to show you the truth. We could have destroyed you. We could have killed every being in your fleet. We chose not to. Remember that, and tell your governments what you have seen today." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. "We do not want your dead. We do not want your worlds. We do not want your submission. We want something much harder to give, your respect. You came here to teach humanity its place. Instead, humanity has shown you ours, and our place is not beneath you. It is beside you, if you are wise enough to accept that. The channel closed. The human fleet held position, watching over their defeated enemies with weapons ready but silent. On the disabled flagship, Vorthax sat in darkness and tried to understand what had happened. Everything he believed about the galaxy had been wrong. Humanity was not a weak young species to be controlled and exploited. They were something far more dangerous, a power that had chosen to be gentle. And in that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of his pride, the High Arbiter began to realize that the true war was not about ships and weapons. It was about ideas, and humanity had already won. Elsewhere in the disabled fleet, Lieutenant Vorketh helped his crewmates restore emergency systems. His hands were shaking, but not from fear. He was thinking about everything he had just witnessed. The humans had spared them. They had possessed the power to kill everyone in the fleet, and they had chosen not to use it. Vorketh had studied many civilizations during his training, but he had never seen anything like this. Power restrained by mercy, strength controlled by wisdom. He did not know what would happen next, but he knew that the galaxy would never be the same. Outside the viewports, human ships maintained their silent vigil. They had proven their strength. Now they would wait to see if the elder species could find the courage to accept what that strength offered. Not conquest, not domination, just the chance to build something better than what had come before. The message spread across the galaxy within hours. The coalition had fallen, and humanity was waiting for an answer. The Galactic Assembly had never been so crowded. Representatives from every known species packed the Great Hall of Nexus Prime, filling seats in corridors and observation platforms that had been empty for centuries. Word of the coalition's defeat had spread across the galaxy like fire, and everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Director Elena Vasquez entered the hall through the main doors, walking the same path she had walked when war was declared. But this time, she was not alone. Behind her came Admiral Chen Wei-Lin and a small group of human officers, their uniforms simple and undecorated. They moved with quiet confidence, showing neither pride nor aggression. The 12 great thrones were occupied by representatives of the elder species. High Arbiter Vorthax sat in his place, but he looked smaller now. His defeat had aged him. His 4 eyes stared straight ahead, refusing to meet the gaze of anyone in the hall. Elena walked to the center of the floor and waited. The hall fell silent. Director Vasquez, said the Speaker of the Assembly, an ancient Ven named Karath. You have requested an audience with this body. You may speak. Elena nodded her thanks. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear, reaching every corner of the vast hall. Honored representatives, she began. 3 weeks ago, this assembly declared war on humanity. You called us children playing at civilization. You said we needed to learn our place. You sent 6,000 ships to teach us that lesson. She paused and looked around at the gathered faces. Instead, humanity taught you a lesson. We disabled your entire fleet in 11 minutes. We killed no one. We took nothing. We asked only that you listen. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Some representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others leaned forward with intense curiosity. You are wondering how this is possible, Elena continued. How could a species so young defeat the combined might of 3 elder civilizations? The answer is simple. We were never as weak as we pretended to be. She gestured to Admiral Chen, who stepped forward with a data tablet. A holographic display appeared in the air above the assembly floor, showing images that made the gathered representatives gasp. Massive shipyards hidden inside asteroids. Fleets of warships numbered in the tens of thousands. Weapon systems that used principles the elder species had not yet discovered. And population figures that made the Dominion census records look like a joke. For 200 years, humanity has been growing in secret, Elena explained. We built our true civilization in places no one thought to look. We developed technology beyond what the galaxy believed possible. And we chose to hide all of it. High Arbiter Vorthax finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Why? If you had such power, why not use it? Why pretend to be weak? Elena turned to face him directly. Because we remembered our own history. The holographic display changed, showing images from Earth's past, wars, genocides, nuclear weapons, the long and bloody story of a species that had nearly destroyed itself before it learned a better way. Humanity was once exactly what you feared, Elena said. We were violent, we were greedy, we conquered and enslaved and destroyed without thinking about the cost. Millions of our own people died because we could not control our worst impulses. She walked toward the thrones, her voice growing more intense. But we learned. Slowly, painfully, at a cost that still haunts us. We learned that strength without wisdom is just another form of weakness. We learned that true power comes not from what you can destroy, but from what you choose not to destroy. The hall was utterly silent. Even the most hostile representatives had stopped whispering. When we first met the elder species, we saw the same patterns repeating. You used your power to dominate younger civilizations. You exploited them, controlled them, forced them to submit to your will. And we knew that if we revealed our true strength, we would become exactly what you feared. Another empire, another conqueror. Another cycle of violence. Elena stopped in front of Vorthak's throne and looked up at the defeated leader. So we chose to be weak. We chose to let you dismiss us and ignore us and underestimate us. We hoped that one day the galaxy would be ready for a different kind of relationship. We hoped that we could prove ourselves worthy of trust before we proved ourselves capable of conquest. Vorthak's voice was barely a whisper. And now you have forced our hand. You declared war on us. You gave us no choice but to reveal what we are. Elena's expression softened slightly. But even now, we are not here to conquer you. We are here to offer you something better. She turned to address the entire assembly. Humanity has the power to dominate this galaxy. Our ships outnumber your combined forces. Our weapons can destroy worlds. Our population dwarfs every species in the Dominion. If we wanted, we could rule everything. She let those words sink in, then continued. But we do not want to rule. We have learned the hard way that empires built on force always fall. The only civilizations that last are those built on cooperation and mutual respect. Admiral Chen stepped forward, carrying a document that glowed faintly with embedded security codes. This is our offer, Elena said. A new charter for the galaxy. Not a hierarchy with humanity at the top, but a true partnership where every species is valued for what it can contribute. We will share our technology with anyone willing to use it peacefully. We will help defend any world that asks for our protection. And we will never, ever try to conquer or control any species that chooses to live in peace. The holographic display showed images of what the galaxy could become. Kethavari scientists working alongside human engineers. Ven builders constructing stations that would benefit everyone. Silith artists creating works that combine the beauty of multiple cultures. A galaxy united not by fear, but by common purpose. All we ask in return, Elena said, is that you treat us as equals, not as children to be controlled, not as threats to be contained, just as partners who want to build something better than what came before. She looked around the hall one final time. This is humanity's offer. You can accept it and join us in creating a new future. Or you can refuse and go your own way. We will not force you. We will not threaten you. We will simply be here, waiting, hoping that one day you will see what we see. A galaxy where strength and compassion can exist together. The assembly erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted at each other in dozens of languages. Some demanded immediate acceptance of the human offer. Others called it a trick, a trap, another form of conquest dressed up in pretty words. But High Arbiter Vorthak sat in silence, staring at the small human woman who had just shattered everything he believed about the universe. He thought about the battle at Kepler's Reach. He thought about the 11 minutes that had ended his fleet's power. He thought about the fact that his crew was still alive because humanity had chosen to spare them. And he thought about a question that Elena Vasquez had asked him weeks ago, when he had declared war. What is humanity's proper place in the galaxy? Now he knew the answer. Humanity's place was wherever they chose to be, and they had chosen to stand beside the elder species rather than above them. It was not weakness. It was wisdom. And Vorthax, who had lived for 300 years, was only now beginning to understand the difference. He stood slowly, and the hall fell silent. Every eye turned to him, the leader who had started this war, the arbiter whose pride had nearly destroyed 3 civilizations. "I have been a fool," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire hall. "I looked at humanity and saw only a young species to be controlled. I did not see the strength they were hiding, and I did not see the mercy they were offering." He turned to face Elena directly. "You could have killed my entire fleet. You could have destroyed our homeworlds. You could have made yourself the masters of everything. Instead, you showed us kindness when we had shown you only contempt." He bowed his head, a gesture of respect that a Kethavari arbiter had not made to another species in 10,000 years. "On behalf of the Kethavari people, I accept your offer, not because we fear you, but because you have shown us what true strength looks like, and we wish to learn." One by one, other representatives rose to speak. Some accepted immediately. Some asked for time to consult with their governments. A few refused entirely and left the hall in anger. But the tide was turning. The galaxy was changing. Elena Vasquez watched it all with the same calm expression she had worn throughout the war. Beside her, Admiral Chen allowed herself a small smile. "Do you think it will work?" Chen asked quietly. Elena considered the question. "I think it has a chance, better than any chance the galaxy has had before. And if some of them refuse, if they try to fight us again, then we will defend ourselves, but we will not become what we fought against." Elena looked up at the great dome of the assembly hall, where stars were visible through transparent panels. "Our ancestors dreamed of reaching the stars. They never imagined we would find the galaxy full of species, just as lost as we once were. Maybe that is why we are here. Not to conquer, but to help." Chen nodded slowly. "A strange destiny for a species that almost destroyed itself." "Perhaps, but destiny is just another word for the choices we make." Elena turned to face the Admiral. "Our ancestors chose to survive. We chose to grow in secret, and now we are choosing to offer our hand instead of our fist. That is the legacy of humanity. Not our ships or our weapons, but the wisdom to know when not to use them." The debates continued for hours. Messages flew across the galaxy. Governments convened emergency sessions to discuss humanity's offer. The future was uncertain, complicated, full of possibilities both wonderful and dangerous. But for the first time in millions of years, the galaxy had hope for something better. And humanity stood at the center of it all, not as conquerors, but as teachers. Not as masters, but as partners. Not as the species that had won the war, but as the species that had chosen not to fight one. The galaxy had declared battle. And Earth had answered with something far more powerful than weapons. They had answered with a vision of what civilization could be. 10 years had passed since the day the galaxy declared war on humanity. And in those 10 years, everything had changed. Admiral Chen Wei-Lin, now retired from active service, stood on an observation platform above the planet Veth Prime. Once, this world had been the fortress capital of the Ven hegemony, a place of soldiers and weapons and fear. Now it was home to the largest joint research station in the galaxy, where Ven engineers worked beside human scientists to solve problems neither species could crack alone. Below her, the city stretched to the horizon. Mixed neighborhoods housed beings from a dozen different worlds. Transit systems built with human technology moved millions of passengers every day. And in the central plaza, a great statue depicted a human and a Ven standing together, their hands joined in partnership. It was a sight that would have been impossible a decade ago. Now it was simply Tuesday. "Admiral Chen," a familiar voice said behind her, "I hoped I would find you here." Chen turned to see a Kethavari officer in the uniform of the Unified Patrol Fleet. He was tall and lean, with 4 arms folded respectfully behind his back. His name was Vorketh, and he had come a long way since the day he had watched his fleet fall at Kepler's Reach. "Fleet Commander Vorketh," Chen said with a warm smile, "I hear your patrol captured those smugglers near the Outer Rim last week." "Well done." Vorketh dipped his head in the Kethavari gesture of thanks. "I had good teachers. Humans showed me that vigilance serves peace better than pride ever did." He moved to stand beside her at the observation platform, looking out at the transformed world below. Do you remember what you said after the battle? He asked. You told us that humanity wanted our attention. I did not understand what you meant at the time. Chen nodded slowly. And now? Now I think I understand. You wanted us to see that there was another way. Not conquest or submission, but cooperation, partnership, trust. He paused. My people spent 2 million years believing that power was the only thing that mattered. You showed us that wisdom matters more. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching a human transport ship descend through the atmosphere, carrying passengers and cargo from a dozen different worlds. There are still those who resist the changes, Vorketh said eventually. The Silith remnant refuses to join the Unified Council. Some Kethvari still dream of the old hierarchy, and there are humans who believe you should have conquered the galaxy when you had the chance. Chen sighed. There will always be those who prefer the old ways. Fear and anger are easy, trust is hard, but every year more species join the council. Every year the borders become more open. Every year we prove that this new path works. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had not declared war? If the coalition had left humanity alone? It was a question Chen had asked herself many times. I think we would have revealed ourselves eventually. We could not hide forever, but maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe we would have found another way. She turned to face the young Kethvari commander. But that is not what happened. You forced our hand, and we showed the galaxy who we really are. And somehow, against all odds, it worked. We are standing here on a world that was once your enemy's fortress, watching our peoples work together to build a better future. That is not something to regret. That is something to celebrate. Vorketh's mandibles shifted in what Chen had learned to recognize as a Kethvari smile. You humans have a strange way of looking at things. Even your defeats become victories. Only if we learn from them, Chen said. That is the secret, really. Not power or technology or clever strategies. Just the willingness to learn, to grow, to become better than we were yesterday. Elsewhere on Nexus Prime, Director Elena Vasquez watched the first session of the truly unified Galactic Council take their seats. It had taken 10 years of negotiation, compromise, and patient diplomacy to reach this moment. And now representatives from 18 species were gathered in a hall that had once been the exclusive domain of the elder civilizations. The seats were arranged in a circle, with no throne higher than any other. The old hierarchy was gone. In its place was something new, a council where every voice had equal weight, where decisions were made by consensus rather than force. Elena sat in the human delegation, surrounded by colleagues who had worked as hard as she had to make this day possible. She was old now, her hair white and her face lined with years of service, but her eyes were as sharp as ever, and her smile held the same quiet satisfaction it had worn on the day she delivered Earth's first response to the war declaration. The Speaker of the Council, a position that rotated between species, was a young Silith who had been chosen specifically because their people had resisted the changes longest. Their crystalline body hummed with nervous energy as they called the session to order. This council represents a new beginning, the speaker announced, their voice translated into a dozen languages. For the first time in galactic history, we gather not as rulers and subjects, but as equals. We are here because we have learned that no single species holds all wisdom. We are here because we have seen what cooperation can accomplish. And we are here because a species called humanity showed us that strength and mercy can exist together. Elena felt tears forming in her eyes. She had worked for this moment for 30 years. She had lied and pretended and hidden her people's true nature, all for the dream of a galaxy where species could trust each other. And now that dream was becoming real. The session continued with discussions of trade agreements, defense coordination, and 100 other practical matters. But beneath the details, something deeper was happening. Species that had viewed each other as enemies for millions of years were learning to see each other as partners. Old hatreds were slowly fading. New friendships were forming, and at the center of it all, humanity stood not as conquerors, but as witnesses. They had proven what was possible. Now it was up to the galaxy to decide if they would reach for it. After the council session ended, Elena walked alone through the corridors of Nexus Prime. She passed memorial gardens dedicated to the dead of past conflicts. She passed schools where children of different species learned together. She passed markets where goods from across the galaxy were traded freely. She came finally to a small plaza where a simple monument stood. It was a block of stone from Earth, placed here on the first anniversary of the war's end. The inscription read, "To the 11 minutes that changed everything, and to the choice that made those minutes matter." Elena touched the stone gently, feeling the roughness of Earth granite beneath her fingers. So much had changed since that day. So much more would change in the years to come. But this moment, this quiet moment of remembrance, was her own. "You look thoughtful," said a voice behind her. Elena turned to see Admiral Chen approaching, still dressed in her formal uniform from the council session. The old warrior's hair was gray now, her face weathered by years of service, but her eyes still held the same calm strength they had always possessed. "I was remembering," Elena said. 30 years ago, I was a young diplomat pretending to be weak in front of species that wanted to crush us. Now I am an old woman watching those same species choose cooperation over conquest. Because of what we did," Chen said. "Because of the choice we made." "We made a bet," Elena corrected. "We bet that if we showed them mercy instead of power, they would learn. We bet that kindness could change things that force never could. And somehow, against all the odds, we won." Chen moved to stand beside her old friend. "Not won, began. The work is never finished. There will always be new challenges, new conflicts, new opportunities to prove what we believe. But the foundation is solid, and that foundation is what we built." Elena nodded slowly. "Do you ever regret it? The hiding? The pretending? The years we spent being weak when we could have been strong?" Chen considered the question for a long moment. "No," she said finally. "I regret the necessity. I regret that the galaxy was not ready for us sooner. But I do not regret what we did. Because those years of hiding taught us something important. They taught us that power is not the same as purpose. Strength is not the same as wisdom. And victory is meaningless if you lose yourself in winning." She turned to face Elena directly. "The galaxy declared battle on us, and we answered with something they never expected. We gave them back their dead and offered them our hand. That is humanity's legacy. Not our ships, not our weapons. Just the simple choice to be better than what we could have been." The two old women stood together in the quiet plaza, surrounded by the sounds of a galaxy learning to live in peace. Above them, ships from a dozen worlds passed overhead, their crews working together as naturally as if they had never been enemies. Somewhere out there, children who had never known war were playing together. Scientists who had once served rival empires were discovering new wonders. Leaders who had once plotted conquest were learning to build instead of destroy. It was not a perfect galaxy. It would never be perfect, but it was better than it had been. And every day it got a little better still. Elena Vasquez smiled the same smile she had worn 30 years ago when Earth first received the declaration of war. But now that smile meant something different. Not anticipation for battles to come, but satisfaction for promises kept. The galaxy had declared battle, and humanity had answered with hope. That was the story they would tell for generations. Not the story of a war, but the story of what came after. The story of a species that could have ruled everything and chose to build something better instead. And in the end, that was the only story that mattered.